Hola, chicos. Hola, chicas. How are you going, lovely folks? Chess on the menu because this is a chess channel, so surprise for you there. Today we are going to talk about something that came up in the last video, or if this video is going to be scheduled differently from what I planned, then in the video where I was observing my student Octavian whilst wearing some hair as opposed to the current state of affairs, which would claim that it's mostly skin and not so much any hair left anymore. So in that video I dropped a comment about white playing bishop h6. Actually, I'm going to show you that structure right now. So in this structure, when the opponent played bishop g5, I predicted that the idea was to play queen d2 and then trade the bishop, and I made an offhand remark about that being a terrible plan. And both on the stream but also afterwards on YouTube, I got this question of why would that be a terrible plan and why is that a bad idea to trade this bishop off. And actually, as very often I'm guilty of this thing, I was somewhat exaggerating, but it's definitely not the right plan. It's not a good plan at all, and therefore I thought that this video I'm going to give you a brief outline about how to approach positions with a Fianchettoed bishop, and when is it okay to trade it and when is it not, because I think there is a little bit of a mystery around it, and a lot of club level players tend to treat that Fianchettoed bishop like a red flag, and as soon as it's there they can't wait to do this and this, and when they trade it off they're like, yes baby, I am now halfway through there. And half of the time at least it's a fundamentally flawed and bad idea. Now, to be fair, in the other half of the cases it's totally fine, but as long as we do it without understanding the underlying causes and reasons, it's just complete lottery whether we do the right or the wrong thing. The good news is that it's very easy in the vast majority of cases. With a very few very subtle exceptions, it's really easy to tell what is going on and whether it's a good or a bad idea. So I'm going to begin with one of the most typical openings in this regard, and that is the Pirc/modern opening. And I'm checking out one of these main lines with early f3. As you can see, in almost every game, white aims to play queen d2, bishop e3. Two plans, one is bishop h6, the other one is to castle. Now, I'm already giving away the big secret that here, after c6, apart from h4, which is followed by bishop h6, the other really good move for white here is bishop h6, which, believe it or not, is going to be followed by h4. And so there is this typical kingside attacking pattern where we really want to jump on that black king as soon as possible, and obviously eliminating that bishop, who is a crucial defender of the black king, is a huge integral part of what we are trying to do. So what makes it good here? First, the bishop is an important defender, but beyond that, it really is needed as a defender because there is an attack coming. Right? So everything is set for an attack because I am castled this way. And that means that I am ready to throw in the kitchen sink and just go gung-ho on the king side and attack like there was no tomorrow. So I can launch a perfectly uncompromised attack where I'm throwing caution to the wind and I'm just going for it. So in this case, it makes a lot of sense. Now, from here, you can already gather that if in this structure somehow white was castled here to the king side and this king were here, then the whole story would be rather lacking, actually, because yeah, you can trade the bishop off, but what then? So you can already sense that there is a little bit of a logic in between, is there an attack going on or not? And then there is another very important aspect that I'm going to unveil a little bit later. Now, very similar setup, Sicilian Dragon. Again, look at what's happening in the opening. We are going to castle opposite sides, right? Both sides have got an attack on the agenda against the opponent's king. And so after king b1, which is one of the most popular moves in this position, white, believe it or not, is aiming to play bishop h6 next. And again, the pattern is almost identical. Trade the bishop off, h4, h5, take, eliminate the knight with knight d5 and its mate on h7. So to model this, I'm going to basically play out the attacking moves that usually lead to success. So take, check, here, and knight d5, eliminating this, and mate is incoming on h7. Okay, so this is more or less it. That's the pattern that you are hoping to execute. And you can see that here, indeed, trading the bishop on g7 is important because not only was it a defender, but it also allows the queen to easily penetrate on h6. Now, already here, however, we need to contrast this with the very famous bind, which is a very similar structure, and a lot of people confuse the two very badly. But when I say it's very similar, it's also quite different. The main differences are the following. Both kings are castled to the same side. So kingside attack is more or less off the cards. 2, white has played c4, which wasn't the case in the previous game, which gives a very unique character to the position in that some of the dark squares feel a little bit tender from white's point of view, and black can certainly utilize the squares to some degree to jump around on. Now, here comes the trickery. And I really love the fact that one of my favorite books, one of my favorite books, which is called Experts versus the Sicilian, in its bind chapter, which was, I think, written by Peter Heine Nielsen. I think so. Before he even starts going into theory at all, he has this diagram as on the very first page of the chapter, explaining that this is the first lesson you need to learn about the bind. And that is that taking here is a crucial strategical error for white. And the correct move is to pull back. And I'm guessing that many of you go like, what? And that is exactly the case. So what we need to understand here, and this requires just one layer extra understanding of the position, is that whenever you are trading bishops, the most important thing, or one of the most important things you need to do, is to look at your own two bishops and try to evaluate and compare them to one another. Which one is the better one? Which one has more function? And which one is the one that does nothing? And so you will find that it's quite curious that in fact our dark squared bishop is controlling important diagonals and squares, whereas this guy here is hardly more than an overgrown pawn. It's a terrible piece because it's buried behind the white pawn chain, which by the way is likely to be expanded by pawn b3. And all of a sudden we realize that we are giving away a beautiful bishop. But then I hear you argue, yeah, but we take black's good bishop. Well, hold on a tick. Which one is black's good bishop here? Because by definition, a good bishop is one that is able to attack the enemy pawns. So if we take it granted that the pawn structure is fixed on the white squares, and part of it already is fixed, then we can safely say that this bishop, in the long run, is going to be rather useless in an endgame. Imagine if in this position, after b3, so I'm going to do this, imagine this position without every single piece except king, king, and these two bishops. Actually, this is so powerful, I'm going to set this up for you. Or, well, I don't know how powerful it is, but I believe in the power of this. So white has a pawn structure like this. Black has a pawn structure like this. We have a bishop here, a king here, and a king here. Let's take it away. Have a look at this. Is the black bishop good, in your opinion? This guy here? Really? Like, what is he going to do in the next 40 moves? Nothing at all. It's running between pawns up and down, being able to target nothing. Now, admittedly, the pawn structure is somewhat fluid. And so black also has the ability to place most of his pawns on the white squares. But it's very crystal clear that this bishop ain't no hero. It's not going to win you a game. Very clearly not. Now, in very stark contrast, I'm now going to show you the exact same structure with these bishops. And now let's take a very quick look and a quick comparison. Now, black first and foremost has a king that is fully able to utilize the weakness of all the dark squares. Some of his pawns are already on black, and he's going to put most of them on black to further undermine the dark squares. This bishop is a waste of space that has no power at all. The reason why these types of positions often appeal to players on the white side of lower level players, because they perceive this bishop as a weak and bad bishop because it's biting into granite. And it would be true if there were a lot more pieces on the board, for one thing, and secondly, if this was guaranteed that these guys are staying here forever. But I can very easily change the structure by playing, for example, e5. I'm just going to play now a few random moves and then play f5. And all of a sudden you realize that now the bishop has got a bit more oomph. And after takes, I can take with both. I would probably take with the king. And now you realize that this bishop does have very serious potential, whilst his body down here is still a total waste of space. Objectively, both of these endgames are drawn because of the even material, but the quality is what you need to see here in the bishops. And so, now we clearly understand Peter Heine Nielsen's very wise words about not trading this. Additionally to that, to move a little bit away from the bishops but still work with the concept, this trade allows black to execute a strategy that is extremely common in this type of setups, and that is, actually no, I'm going to do it with just knight c5, knight d5, black plays, I'm going to play lemon now just to model the idea. So the idea is that once the bishops are gone, the dark squared bishops, I can go e5, I can go knight e6, I can take, and we're going to land in the textbook, the absolute textbook case of good knight, bad bishop. And this could never happen if we keep the dark squared bishops on the board, because even if we just disregard the fact that this pawn is hanging, e5 here ruins this bishop for life. It's just now a terrible, awful piece. And so no one does that, and so in this position black usually plays moves like a5, a4, queen a5, and so on, and still plays a complex game. But it's very important that we understand the dynamics of the bishops. Moving again one step away from said example, this one is one of my all-time favorites for the ultimate no-go bishop trade. This is the, actually no, I will stay with the white, the King's Indian defense, and within the King's Indian defense, this is the so-called Averbach variation with bishop g5. The idea is that after e5, take, queen takes, rook takes, knight d5 wins something because of the pin. And so black first plays knight a6 to defend this pawn. Queen d2. Very cool move, because again you go like, oh yeah, we are going bishop h6. No, not at all. Queen d2 is actually not intending to go here at all. The idea of queen d2 is actually to deny h6, so that after e5, d5, black finds it very difficult to remove himself from this pin. And actually there is a variation here where white he plays h4. And believe it or not, but even this move is not played with the idea of a kingside attack. This move is predominantly designed to restrict white on the king side before white switches over to the queen side and decides the game where he has more space. So it is quite an amazing idea actually. So for example, after CD, knight c5, let's go, f3 now has to be played though, so I need to show you a different game or a different example. Queen b6, can I go h5 here? No. I'm trying to find a game where h5 was played. So the point I'm trying to deliver is that once h5 is played, white's usual aim is to get h6 in. And the bishop is completely buried alive in that position. And another thing that I really want to show you, just to model this whole idea, is that once e5 is played, it's very difficult to checkmate this king without being castled here and having amassed a large army around the king. Because, let me show you why. So let's say I go queen e7, bishop here, I take, bishop d7, h5 here, we take, I take back, take, check here, and now you realize that this king here, queen here, is defending everything to perfection. And even if you do get a knight in here, I still have enough defenders on h7. And that's a big if that you have time for that. Queen g7 is a very natural defensive measure here that is going to ease the pain for black. And so the whole idea of attacking here on the king side by white is just nonsensical. The idea behind h4 is to actually restrict black so that when I play h5, then I can float h6, or often I can just trade and then just leave it, because then black later on can't really play for f5 without severely then compromising his own king side. I actually talk about this in my third course, king safety. This particular setup and how to attack and how to decide which side to play on is an integral part of that course. So here, once again, no one has ever played actually after c6, bishop h6 in my Leech's database, which unfortunately now I'm not putting on display, but you can trust me. White, he plays f3, h4, bishop f3, bishop d3, bishop d1, knight f3, castles dc, rook d1, and h3. No one, not one person ever played here bishop h6. And the reason for that is because this is the textbook worst bishop in history. It has no future, it has nothing to its name. It's a terrible, awful piece. And we can argue that there are scenarios where it comes to life after f5 in some variations, but it's very difficult to foresee right now how that could ever be a reality. And in fact, a very common plan actually in this structure is that after take bishop d7, let's go with g4. Again, a non-attacking idea, by the way, but no, I don't want to go with that. Let's go bishop here. So what I wanted to show you here was that very often once black mobilizes his pieces, there is this plan where okay, so let's drop back. Let's go here, let's go here, let's go here. I really want to show you the plan itself. Black moves the knight, okay, and then the bishop comes here, and then the bishop comes here and here, just to trade that piece of dirt off. Yep, and you can see that it leaves a massive gap behind, but white is not able to exploit that without his dark squared bishop being present. So if you look at this position, it's utterly unrealistic that white actually can stir up the pot anytime soon on this side of the board and exploit the weaknesses. Maybe the case later on with f4 break, because my knights are very, very poorly placed. But generally speaking, these pieces are not like this, which means that f4 is often met by a knight being on d7 and then able to jump onto e5. So long story short, bishop h6 here and in similar structures is just a nonsense and has never been played by top players for the reason that it serves black's interests fully. Actually, did I save a line here? No, I did not. So now we are going to move on to, there it is. I wanted to show you another line in the King's Indian that is very similar in the Zaimish. There is this idea where, no, not this one. Take, g4. Black plays h5, trying to provoke a take. When after knight here, we can now monitor this weak square. h3, knight h7. Do you know the idea behind knight h7? Very clear. Bishop here, bishop here. Again, black is the one initiating the trade of that bishop. So for example, after castles, black plays h4 to avoid opening up the files onto the king. And now black's main, absolute first and foremost strategic aim is to play bishop h6, f6, bishop g5 and trade this off. And again, if you look at it and you imagine this position without the bishops, it's full of ginormous, weak, dark squares, and white has this awful, atrocious bishop. And very often, very impulsively, club level players often makes matters far worse in such situations by going like, oh, but now I'm gonna attack with f4, which just makes things 7 times worse than what they have already been, because after the trade, now I have got a beautiful outpost here. I'm gonna trade a queen here, and yes, white may jump a knight to d4, but that has nowhere to go. Whereas my knight is monitoring important squares and hits a pawn. And there is still no attack to be seen. Backward pawn, terrible bishop, and things just escalate and we lose and we are like, I don't understand what I did wrong. Everything, as far as this game is concerned, allowing the black trade, bishop trade, followed by f4. A very typical scenario. Last but not least, we are going to now have a look at the actual game that triggered this whole conversation, which roughly looked like this, and that was queen d2 when I predicted that this was a plan which I labeled bad. So now that I put this on the tail end of the video and you heard my arguments, I'm pretty sure that you can also see and in fact argue that this is in fact a poor plan, because all it achieves is that it trades off our good bishop, and it keeps us with, and it allows us to have an absolute woeful f3 bishop, and there is no attack whatsoever to be seen or to be conducted, excuse me, against the black king. So it was just, we traded equal amount of pieces, but the qualitative change from white's point of view was a shocker and a half. So when you are considering trading this bishop off, as much as you consider what comes off, you need to think of what stays on the board, because that's what you are going to play with, not with what's gone. Okay, and so this is what I would recommend you to consider in the first place. And hopefully this video is going to help you a little bit in order to understand how to approach a fianchettoed bishop and when to trade it and when not to. Now, there are far more complex cases than the ones that I highlighted, and I might make a second video about those, but I think that this is a really good Kickstarter for you to wrap your head around when to trade, when not to trade, when to respect your own bishop more than your opponent's. So I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it valuable, and I will be back with more soon. Bye.